Today's video is not about a game, it's about a feeling, and one that you've probably felt a few times in your gaming life too. But here, it all started with this one item. Why does this cost 200 million rubles? See, it's been a while since I played a proper MMO, and going into Stalzone, I didn't know I'd be playing one here either. As an extraction shooter specialist who mainly plays Escape from Tarkov, I relished the opportunity to take on this sponsored series in a unique but related game. But now that I'm nearly 50 hours deep, it's not really anything like I expected it to be. The most important part of all though, after finally peering through the curtain on the endgame, there is something deeply nostalgic about it. Back when I first played Escape from Tarkov 7 years ago, the flea market was totally open and you could buy practically anything. I distinctly remember browsing through that marketplace and wondering how on earth could anyone afford some of these endgame items. We're talking multiple millions for some of the best cases in the game, and remember, this was back before the hideout was even put in, and items like nuts and bolts had no actual value and could only be sold to the trader for pennies. On top of that, scav runs were insane free-for-alls rather than free loot runs. Making that kind of money back then was significantly harder than it is today. So hold that thought in your mind for a moment. When I started Stalzone, I thought it was going to be more of a looter game, but the game kept changing as I went through. Starting out, you're grabbing crafting materials and getting used to the world, moving through the camps and understanding how to progress at the beginning of the game. In the early mid-game, you're more so completing the story to give free access to the later zones. But one question that I had going along was why I really needed to keep rubles in the first place. Other than buying some ammo and basic meds, because of the barter tree, I wasn't actually spending anything. The way that you get improvements in power on your gear in Stalzone at the beginning is going out into the world, getting the ingredients that you need to get to the next barter, going back to the base and then buying it, using your existing gun as one of the prerequisites. Because of this, at the beginning you really don't need rubles for all that much, so it was only after I finished the story and started looking into the endgame at all that I realised that rubles take on a dramatically more important role because of artifacts. These items are found out in the world and become an intrinsic part of your build, and also what you're working towards generally when you play, providing improved stamina and movement speed or increased HP, as well as a plethora of other specific bonuses depending on the artifact. These can be combined together and carried with you to enhance the specialism that you're working towards, as well as managing the downsides that come with them. Each artifact appears with a rarity when it spawns and rolls stats within the range from that specific rarity, and can be upgraded even further level by level up to a +15 version of itself for the most powerful boosts. The better the rarity, the higher the range it can roll in, but obviously the rarer it becomes, hence the literal hundreds of millions for some of the best items in the game with the best rolls. I was absolutely shocked. But browsing through the auction house and looking at what all these things do gave me that amazing feeling that only MMO and MMO-like games can do. A sense of wonder, a sense of discovery, and a world much bigger than yourself, where you've only just scratched the surface. This was the moment where I really feel like I actually got what Stalzone is all about, finally, and how people can become wealthy in this game hunting for artifacts in the first place, and the tension that comes with it. Remember, you don't lose any gear when you die in this game. It's a classic MMO in that sense. You do lose crafting resources when farming events out in the world if you haven't brought them back to base yet, and these are needed to upgrade your gear, but opponents can't use the items they get from you directly even if they kill you and take your bag. But artifacts, these are fair game, and if they've been taken fresh from the zone and haven't gone back to base yet, they can be extracted by other players if they kill you while you're holding them. Given the chance of these insane rewards though, it's no surprise that artifact hunting is one of the more popular activities in the endgame for many players. The fact that the artifacts themselves are not protected from PvP on discovery is precisely the reason why Stalzone's PvP ends up mattering so much in the late game. This progressively moves from, oh, I died, doesn't matter too much at the start, to, I died, it sucks about the resources, but never mind, to, damn, I might be carrying 1,000,000 rubles on me, let's get out of here alive. This is the crazy thing about Stalzone. In the early game, artifacts are actually really underemphasized because the early ones aren't very good, they give super limited stats, they don't sell for much, and it's hardly worth spending any time making builds with them. This is partly because you only see the most common rarity, which rolls the worst stats possible for each one, which is what makes it so surprising to see the multi-million ruble artifacts towards the end on the market. So at this stage in my progression, that feeling of how would I even go about getting that is the same one that I had in Tarkov all those years ago, looking at item cases on the flea, and in fact spans across most MMOs with decent progression systems, the first one I can remember playing being RuneScape. But the shared principle between all these? It's the ability for players to buy and sell from each other around valuable items for long-term progression goals. But that doesn't mean that the auction house has to be completely open. In Stalzone, although it looks like it, this is not actually the case. There are some important restrictions to prevent the economy from collapsing in value, and players from circumventing progression using the marketplace. Firstly, some important facts. There are no wipes in Stalzone, and you don't lose any kit when you die. This means that, unless you start a new character, your progression is basically permanent once you've reached that next level, which obviously means that more players cluster at the endgame once they've worked through all of the beginner and mid-tier content. This is the reason that the game has gear-based matchmaking in the first place. You don't want newbies going up against veterans when they're severely outgunned. You can get away with this in a game like Tarkov because the progression is relatively flat, and even somebody who is super geared can die to a well-placed shot from a pistol to the face or a shotgun to the legs. But in MMOs, that's often not possible or even practical because of the more vertical gear progression. But as it turns out in Stalzone, you actually can't sell regular weapons on the auction house or the barter materials to craft them because of the binding system. Farmed materials are bound to the character that picked them up, and weapons from the main tree are also bound to you on creation. Combined with the fact that other players can't take the crafting materials from themselves from your body directly, means that the progression element of the economy is very securely gated against rubilification, where everything just comes down to how much money you've got. There are some special items that unpack into 20 of their respective barter item that are purchasable from the auction house, but these are relatively expensive for those that are more prone to bottlenecks, as you'd imagine with an open market system. This allows the two systems to almost work independently of each other. You have the barter tree itself, which requires you to go and get the materials to progress onto the next sets of weapons, armor, optics, attachments, and then you have everything else, which includes artifacts, well, most of the time, but the nuance doesn't really matter here. Either way, these systems effectively square the round hole of no gear loss and no wipes with an open trading system. If all of that has piqued your interest so far and you want to try Stalzone yourself, it is free to play, and you can use the link in the description along with my welcome bonus code to grab some extra starter rewards. And if you're already playing, I'd love to hear how you found the economy so far. So, what now? Well, I can already feel myself falling down the rabbit hole of playing the market. Back in my days of Diablo 3, I used to flip low-level legendaries to make money on the auction house, as players often don't know or care to calculate the exact value of their items, especially when they can roll in different ranges of stats. Scooping up cheap ones with great rolls and relisting them was hugely profitable in between playing the actual game, and with the number of artifacts and the variety of stats here in Stalzone, it feels like something very similar could come into play, and I am a right sucker for this kind of mechanic. Ironically, Diablo 3's trading system failed for precisely some of the reasons that we just talked about that Stalzone and to an extent Tarkov avoid, because actual in-game progression could be skipped using the marketplace instead at a much cheaper price than finding those things organically in your own games. Stalzone has locked this down through the binding system and the barter tree, and Tarkov avoids this, as I said, to some extent through the progression of ammo, which ends up being the most important thing for killing other players. These days, thankfully, most games have more carefully managed systems to avoid the problems, as we're finding out in Stalzone in real time. So now for Stalzone, I need to make a lot more money. With the North unlocked, it's time to look for rare artifacts and hoping for a big payout. Previously, I invested some time into getting this scanner. This lets you see artifacts directly on the screen as a small red dot within a short radius. It uses battery fast though, so you have to keep the runs quite targeted. This uncommon helium is worth just north of 100,000 rubles, the first decent artifact that I've found on my journey.
Oh, that'll. Oh, that'll.
Doing runs like this just after an eruption can easily net 50k plus for even just a 5-minute loop, even if you don't find anything that special. But again, I feel like I've only just scratched the surface.
Oh, that'll. Oh, that.
So as usual, a big shout out to all of my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.